Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So it's Thursday morning, and I was having a conversation with someone yesterday along the lines of, kind of a sleepy week for Trump.
Yeah.
Not much really going on, and then all of a sudden, bam! It's a schoolyard brawl between Biden and Trump.
I welcome this. I know some people don't like it; they think it's unseemly. We've crossed that bridge. This is the new normal. So I think this is as normal as it gets in this postmodern Trumpian era. I like these two old scrappers going at it, and I'm not sure who would win in a fair fist fight. To be honest with you, I think that it's. You think Trump's a little doughy, a little slow off the mark? Yeah, I mean, I don't know, how fit Joe Biden is either exactly. I haven't looked that closely at him, but I don't know. I think it's a toss up. I don't know where my money goes on that one.
I think it was Rick Wilson who tweeted, "I think Biden's just going to challenge you to go up 3 flights of stairs."
Well, I know that we're supposed to live in modern times, and physical prowess shouldn't matter that much. But I feel like we've reverted, actually, in that regard. And I think the defining moment was when Jeb Bush, who's like 6'3", had to stand on his tiptoes in a picture. And at some point, I think we've gone back to this era where it does matter. And so I think Joe Biden is now winning the Democratic primary.
I do want to explore that a little bit.
It's my bottom line.
So I don't know if you saw John Oliver last week, which everyone's talking about in regards to the Bundo Bunny book, which is now an Amazon bestseller. But earlier in the broadcast, he had a small Putin segment about Putin's presidential victory. We should probably talk about Trump's response to that too. But in that segment, he showed a clip of a girl group video, a music video, that aired or was shared on the internet not too far away from the election date, called Vova, and Vova is a Russian term of endearment. It's a borderline pornographic video where three women.
How exactly do I find this? Just to research.
Vova Putin. And I
love it when you talk dirty.
It's 3 women who are, scantily clad, fantasizing about marrying Putin, and I mean, like literally humping taxidermy. I'm not kidding. And fondling pottery.
Look, everyone has a certain fetish. I'm not here to judge. If pottery is your thing, then consenting adults, right? I mean, pottery.
And forgive me, I can't remember where I just read it, but in Putin's first election, which was relatively more democratic than subsequent ones, it was a massive gender cap. He had an enormous popularity with women, much more so than men.
Okay, I saw a column about babushkas.
Maybe that was it. That was it.
It's not just women; it's old women.
Yeah.
And the article said that it's because Vladimir Putin is the only living man of their age. Like in Russia,
we didn't drink himself.
You and I would be in Russia. You and I would be put out to pasture. I mean, granted, after 3 or 4 decades of drinking a bottle of vodka a day, it does take a toll on you. But there aren't a lot of men of a certain age, and so Putin is like this rock star among Russian grandmas.
So you're saying this helps Biden in the Democratic primary, and that might seem discordant with what we generally hear about the Democratic base, that this is a Me Too moment. There's a pushback against toxic masculinity that
Yes.
Biden seems to be, falling into that pool. But is there a disconnect between the heart and the head? The head tells you this is not the way one should behave, in a civilized primary, or especially in the Democratic Party at this moment in time. But on a gut level,
the heart wants what the heart wants.
So
I got a fever, and the only cure for that fever is Joe Biden.
So is your piece up yet? Your Daily Beast piece about this?
Hell no, I'm taking notes right now based on stealing ideas you're giving me.
Okay. But your idea, this is not me feeding you. Your idea was that Biden is emulating what Bill Clinton once said, it's better to be strong and wrong than weak and right.
That's true. And the people who are weak and right are people like Jeff Flake, who are not only on the right of both Biden and Trump, depending on how you define that, but right is in the sense of being correct.
Well, that might explain why you, conservative Matt Lewis, are more attracted to Joe Biden than Jeff Flake. But just keep it within the Democratic Party sphere at the moment. And I'm maybe a better person to be asked this than you. But is strong and wrong going to be the currency that wins the Democratic primary, or is that not going to be enough for an old white guy to win in this current environment?
Well, okay, so look, I think it's very clear that Joe Biden's got a lot of problems. He's very handsy. He is gaffe prone. He has said racially insensitive things. He's also an old white dude, which doesn't help you in the Democratic primary. Let's not pretend that it does. It's a strike against him, especially in the Me Too moment. So there's a whole bunch of problems that Joe Biden has. I think that the fact that he has this strong and working class Joe Sixpack vibe would help him win the general against Donald Trump. And I think the fact that he was Barack Obama's vice president may help him weather the predictable storm and the immense pushback that he would get from the left in trying to win the Democratic nomination. This is all to say, I think it'd be very difficult for him, but he may be the only guy who is perfectly positioned to kind of to thread this needle.
What we've seen in the recent Democratic primaries, so we saw Conor Lamb win in Pennsylvania 18, which he didn't have a primary, but it was evidence that someone who wasn't going to be fully orthodox, fully progressive orthodox, could win in Trump country. So there's some belated progressives trying to say, oh, wait, he ran he defended Medicare and Social Security, and he was an economic populist because he supported tariffs. So this is not an argument for tacking to the center. But he never attacked Trump personally. He supported an assault weapons ban, which he stuck to after Parkland, although he did embrace background checks. And he spoke a lot about bipartisanship and common ground. So he wasn't running in the style of a soup to nuts progressive populist. And as evidenced by the fact that a lot of progressive groups didn't back him. Democracy for America, Progressive Change Campaign Committee, Justice Democrats, Our Revolution, those folks didn't play because they didn't see him as one of their own. And now you have the Illinois primary, where Dan Lipinski eked out a victory over Marie Newman. And some progressives are trying to say, this is a sort of a moral victory for us. We gave him a good scare. He might have only won because of Republican crossover votes and Republican donors. He's clearly not where the heart and soul of the Democratic Party is. And that's true. I mean, he's definitely probably the most conservative Democrat left. And people of his ilk probably won't be around in the party for all that much longer. But it does raise the question, how strong is the progressive populist movement? And mind you, Marie Newman was really less of a Bernie-crat. She wasn't running as an economic populist. She was running more on social issues. And I'm pro-choice and he's not. I'm pro-immigration and he's not. But there's been a lot of talk about how dominant the left is going to be in a Democratic primary, and I can't argue that they're going to be completely impotent. That'd be overstating the case. But it does make you pause. How strong are they going to be? And Biden has been relatively alone in pushing back on Bernie crap populism. Whereas most of the field has been falling over themselves trying to prove themselves to be the real populist. Cory Booker is trying to shed his Wall Street past, and prove that he's a good populist. Warren is out there with her own health care bill trying to show that, she's for single payer, but in lieu of that, she has some other good ideas that are populist in nature, that could make a more immediate difference. And of course, Bernie is still being Bernie. Bernie and Warren are having an interesting dance. Bernie invited Warren to his town hall, which raises the question, is he trying to prop Warren up and he's not going to run himself, or is he, keeping his enemy close, trying to show he's the top dog and she's just a panelist at his event? I can't really say at this point. The point I'm trying to make in all this is, there may be an element in the Democratic Party that says, on the question of who is best positioned to win, who is best positioned to take on Trump in a general election, since there hasn't been a clear-cut, indisputable, progressive populist victory in this run-up in the special elections.
Right.
It undermines the argument that you need a Bernie-style politician to win in the general. And if you got a whole bunch of people swimming in that pool and Biden's kind of standing out there by himself, he may win a healthy plurality of the vote that does him well in the primary.
No, it very well could be. Look, I think if you care about winning the general election, if that is your primary focus, I think you make a really good argument that Joe Biden is the guy. Now, there's other considerations. Revenge, ideology, it's our turn. I mean, think of, I don't have to tell you the optics of two old white guys fighting each other while you're having a Me Too moment, while you're finally we're going to have, minority candidates who are, sort of that are ready for primetime running. You're going to have, you're going to have Gillibrand. You're going to have Kamala. You're going to have Cory Booker. I mean, you're going to
have I think this will be the first time. First, we're going to have multiple people of color in a primary, and it's not like Al Sharpton. Right.
I mean, this is like legit.
Multiple credible people of color candidates in a primary, and multiple credible. There may have been more than one woman in a primary. Forgive me if I'm my memory is failing me, but obviously we didn't have more than one woman in 2016, and I don't think we had more than one woman in 2008, if memory isn't failing me. So I think you're going to have multiple credible women in this race as well. And look,
you're telling me that you're going to turn to how old is Joe Biden?
I think he'll be 78 in 2020.
So the good old boys, just when we're on the verge of nominating, finally, and you're going to turn to Joe Biden. Like, that's going to be the pushback, of course.
Look, when I tell people on the left, look, I think Bernie and Biden are going to be in there, and they're going to have a lot of support to start with.
Yeah.
You get eye rolls. You get exasperation.
Right.
I can't believe we're going to have two old white guys here. And there is a real considerable constituency of someone who does not want that on the left. The question is, can it consolidate around a single candidate to overcome the followings that Bernie and Biden have?
But I think Joe has there's a real argument for Joe. First of all, need I remind everybody, Barack Obama is vice president for 8 years. On top of that, I think, unlike Hillary, I think he can win Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin, or at least make a real run and win some of those states and be very competitive there. So Biden would win California and New York, obviously. He's going to win the Democratic strongholds. Trump is not going to steal those. And then Biden goes into Trump country, probably not going to win West Virginia, but maybe he wins Pennsylvania. I think it's pretty likely Joe Biden would win Pennsylvania, right? Maybe that's probably game over. I think Biden could peel off sort of a lot of working class populists who voted for Obama and Trump. And I think he also could peel off, potentially, if he ran the right kind of race, people like me, even. And so I think Biden really gives you a lot of opportunities to expand the map in a way that, and then there's the toughness thing. There's the machismo thing, which I do think, like, maybe it's retrograde, but I think it matters. I really do. Like, I'm not saying I like it, but Donald Trump can destroy people. We've seen it happen to Little Marco and Lion Ted.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about this exchange that Biden and Trump are now having. On some level, you want to know, how are you going to deal with Trump's bluster? How are you going to deal with the insults and the put downs?
Right.
And people got really excited in the 2016 election because Warren was tweeting these barbs against Trump, and people were like, "Yeah, she really got him on this one." And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough for people to say, "You're showing me you have toughness and sharpness and wit when going at him." But I don't know how people feel today seeing Trump go after Warren as Pocahontas. How people feel like, okay, Warren's going to get the better of this exchange. Look how she's dealing with the Pocahontas thing now. Yeah. I heard someone tell me she did an interview recently where she said, every time Trump calls me Pocahontas, I'm going to talk about Native American issues and issues in the Native American community and make it about them and not about us. Now, the person I talked to, you're shaking your head, Matt Lewis, but people on the podcast can't see that. Matt Lewis is shaking his head. But
I'm okay. I'm sorry, you go, and then I gotta respond to that.
The guy that I was talking to was like, I thought that was a good answer. I mean, whether that person's sensibilities was right or not, the question is, what will Democratic primary voters think is proof this person can go toe-to-toe with Trump? I think that's going to be a factor in deciding, because people are going to say, like, almost anybody can theoretically win this state or that state against a weakened Trump, but the fear is, will Trump cut you down to size? And show me that you have the mettle that Trump won't let you cut you down to size.
So first of all, I'm not sure that Elizabeth Warren can win Pennsylvania and Ohio, states that I think Joe Biden would have a real shot. But putting that aside, I think we all have to admit our worldview bias. And it's formed based on what we were told when we were little kids, how tall we are, what our skin color is, what church we go to or don't go. Like, our entire experience forms a worldview that informs how we respond to certain things. You could look at someone and be like, that person's cool. Someone else looks at that same person and says, no, that person's lame. So I'm not pretending that, like, my biases are right or that anyone has a better, like, taste. Taste is all subjective, right? And so I'm not going to pretend that I have better taste than the next guy. I would say that when it comes to judging West Virginia, Pennsylvania, working class people that voted for Trump, considering I went to college in West Virginia, my mom lives in Pennsylvania and voted for Trump, that I probably have a better sense of, like, what's going to play in those areas in a general election when you need more than just liberal primary voters to win than some liberals might think, right? So, like, I think that the people who think that Elizabeth Warren could pull this off are living in a liberal bubble. She would be a joke to these people, in my opinion. I mean, it's not quite as bad as Hillary Clinton, but it's approaching Hillary Clinton territory.
Now,
Joe Biden can do it.
Now, Warren, I mean, the argument for Warren has always been that she has the street cred on economic populism that almost nobody else has. She looks these Wall Street bankers in the eye in the Senate and shreds them. You got the viral video evidence to prove it. She's not a wallflower. She's not milquetoast. She brings the receipts when it comes to those issues. And even when people in the 2016 primary, when folks in the Hillary camp were saying there was latent sexism and people voted wanting Bernie and not Hillary, some of the response was, "But I love Elizabeth Warren." You have lots of Bernie bros say, "I love her." And
no, I do think there's latent sexism, and I think that's part of the reason that she's. Look, I think Donald Trump is a unique threat, possibly to liberal democracy, and a unique opponent to go up against. And so I'm thinking about who can match up against him and who he will destroy in the eyes of the people where I come from. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a much harder job to do that to Joe Biden.
Let me shift to the Republican side, because you wrote a piece the other day about the possibility that Jeff Flake would run against Trump in the primary. He said that if no one else did, he would. Although I think there's a good odds that John Kasich will do it, and Flake then would not.
Yeah. I just saw a story today that John Kasich is saying he's not married to the Republican Party and he might run as an independent.
Well, that would be if he did that. If there was talk earlier about a Kasich Hickenlooper unity ticket, which Hickenlooper then downplayed.
Let me just go back to where we just came from.
Okay.
John Kasich ain't tough. He whines. He's very whiny. Look, I'm not saying I'm not pretending that I'm Mr. Macho here either. Okay, like I'm not running for president, and I'm not saying this is fair. I'm not saying it's fair.
You're a closet liberal elitist.
Apparently, but
latte sipping NPR listening.
Look, I didn't write these rules. I just abide by them, and I'm not saying this is good or fair. Look, John Kasich, in a sane world, is probably a better man and certainly a better leader than Donald Trump. Forget that we don't live in a sane world. Like Kasich is right and weak, and so I don't think he has that toughness that Joe Biden has.
Well, my question is not would they beat Trump in a primary. I think neither Kasich or Flake would do that.
Yeah.
But how much would they expose division in the Republican Party? We just had an Illinois primary where.
Can I make another? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bill, but I'll do it because I'm strong now. I want to make because I'll forget this point. I think it's important to make. It's not original. I've probably even said it here before, but I believe that Bill Clinton lied. It's better to be strong and wrong than right and weak, right? In politics. But even more important to that is, if your message is about civility, you really have to be tough. So if your message is, we need to fight like hell and we're going to give it to them, you could be 5'0" and weigh 100 pounds soaking wet if you're giving people hell. You could be Harry Truman, okay? But if your message is, we all need to work together and we need civility and finding common ground, what helps if you're a former Marine like Connor Lamb? You know what I'm saying? Like you need to have a little gravitas or toughness, a lot actually. If your fundamental message is about civility and gentility and you need in politics, you need to counterbalance that with a tough image. And so I think part of the problem with Flake and Kasich is it's a double whammy.
So here we are, Illinois primary, Bruce Rayner, billionaire governor, Republican governor, and he's had difficult time working with a Democratic state legislature. And sometimes has broken with Republican orthodoxy, signed a bill that expanded abortion rights in Illinois, and so some of the right are very mad at him about that, among other things. Gets a challenge from a no-name, I think state legislator, Janine Ives, runs a super right-wing campaign, has a very incendiary ad where she has people. She's a teachers union person who's African American in a T-shirt, an actor, not a real union person. Thanking Rayner for working with Rahm Emanuel to help teachers union. She has a woman in one of the Women's March pussy hats thanking Rayner for his abortion legislation. She has someone dressed as transgender thanking Rayner, very crudely so. And so there's a lot of tutting. This is an awful offensive ad. It's a divisive ad. Take it off the air. She doesn't apologize at all, and she comes this close to actually beating Rayner in the primary. It's like 51-49. Is this more evidence that we talk about how Trump has taken over the party, and obviously in many ways he has, but it's not complete. It's not 100% to zero. There's still this faction of folks who are uncomfortable with the direction of the party, and a faction of folks who are still trying to clean house of established Republicans. So if a Kasich or a Flake run, how much does that weaken Trump's ability to make into the general? I think it was I think it was Jonathan Bernstein on Twitter. Forgive me if I'm misattributing it, trying to point out that just because there's a primary challenge doesn't mean that the incumbent is weak. We remember Buchanan going after George W. Bush. We remember Ted Kennedy going after Jimmy Carter. Those things were weakening moments. And Reagan going against Gerald Ford, those things weakened them in the general. But Nixon had two primary challengers, Ashbrook and McCloskey, which in 72, and that didn't break his stride at all. So just having the primary isn't enough to knock Trump off his stride. But if there is a real faction of Republicans who are unhappy with them, who might not stick around for the general election, go for independent, go for a Joe Biden, what kind of a threat does a Kasich or a Flake present to Trump in that respect?
So first of all, I think the big X factor now obviously is the midterms. How bad are the midterms? If the midterms are catastrophic for Republicans, then I think that impacts things. Republicans start to peel away from Trump a little bit, maybe. Obviously, the Russian investigation, the Stormy Daniels. So there's all these like environmental factors that could impact this. The answer to this, I tend to believe that Trump's danger is still in a general election. Assuming now we live in a crazy chaotic world now, so assuming that they're how do I put this? I can't say assuming nothing weird happens, because weird things happen every day now, right? But assuming nothing really big happens, a terrorist attack, Trump is indicted, if that's even possible. Assuming nothing like that happens, if things just sort of stay on the crazy trajectory that they're on, I don't think that that there's any viable primary that could really hurt him or even weaken him. I don't think an independent run hurts him. That does create a pretext for blaming the Never Trumpers if Trump loses, which I think would have long-term damage to my cause. So I'm actually kind of against the independent run. I think the best case scenario, and this is not a great scenario, but I think the best case scenario is someone like a Joe Biden, who decides to basically not run up the score on hot button cultural issues, sort of declare a truce on that. Maybe he even promises to serve one term.
Well, there's some reporting that he doesn't want to say that.
Well, that might make him look weak. So
yeah, right. I think that. That's been discussed in his circles, but we would have a quote from him on it. But the reporting, it was in Politico, saying that he's dismissed that as something that would should have
probably a bad idea. Even if you only want to serve one term, it might be a bad idea to telegraph that you're gonna.
Yeah.
At least for him, I thought McCain should have, but who knows? But I think that the best chance of stopping Trump is if there is an alliance between someone like Joe Biden and Never Trumpers, and then of course there'd be an unspoken alliance between Biden and kind of working class white voters in the Rust Belt, and I think that's the best chance of stopping Trump is in the general. I don't think that the resistance. Now, look, I think that the danger is that if Trump loses, it should be clean, because if Trump loses a clean election, then Trumpism. If we lose the midterms, I'm still calling us we. like I talk about if we lose the game on Sunday, even though I've never taken a snap for the Redskins. If we lose the midterms and then Trump loses the presidency, you could argue that Trumpism should be rejected, and that there'll be a return to normalcy, and that people might be like, well, I guess we need to win some Hispanic voters. I guess we can't alienate, suburban moms. Like something good could come from that. But the danger I see is if it looks like there's a spoiler, like John Kasich costs him Ohio, or even if it is plausible to make that like accusation, that could hurt the potential for the right fixing itself. So anyway,
so you want a two-way, not a three-way race?
I think so. I could be persuaded otherwise, but I think that there's too much of a danger that even if Trump loses, that having an asterisk on that race could prevent the healing and the come to Jesus moment that needs to happen.
Well, I mean, a counter to that would be, you actually had that divide in the Republican Party in 1912 when Teddy Roosevelt storms out of the convention.
So I wrote my dissertation on that 1912 race. You don't have to tell me about it. Why don't you, just for the sake of the audience, enlighten them?
This is when Teddy thought that Taft, who was his protege, wasn't being progressive enough. Ran against him. It was one of the first races where they even had primaries, although not very many. Teddy wins what primaries they did have, but that was not the lion's share of the delegates, and there was a whole delegate credential fight. The Roosevelt folks thought that the Taft forces stole it from him. They storm out of the convention. They launched the Progressive Party across the street, or down the street, and the Republican Party essentially cleaves. And Woodrow Wilson wins the presidency with a plurality. Now, that was not, that could very well have been the death knell of the Republican Party. And the progressives wanted Teddy to run again in 1916, but with the Great War brewing, and Teddy wanting to see, and this is when Wilson was trying to stay out of the war, and Teddy being a neocon imperialist, although they didn't use the term neocon those days, but that was his ilk. He wanted to see a Republican Party that was steadfast for going in the war. He throws the Progressive Party under the bus. He basically kills them off, and says we got to get behind the Republican Party and unify and put those issues to the side, and that heals the Republican Party. They don't win in 1916, but they do come close. But the Republican Party does stick together for the rest of our days. So it's possible to recover from that. Now, Trump is not Teddy, so it's unclear how easy it would be to heal after getting into a fight with him. But it is possible to recover from something that grievous.
Indeed, and no one knows what the future will hold, and what a post-president, how long a post-presidency, and what a post-presidency of Donald Trump would look like.
Yeah,
I mean, what does he do? What does he say after he's gone?
He says awful things. He slaps his name on buildings and has a reality TV show. How hard is this to predict?
Well, okay, does it matter? Does he command?
What I think we don't know is how much does he care about the Republican Party after his presidency is done? Does he just check out and just worry about making money? Or does he stay in the mix and complicate the ability for people to get together?
Does he endorse? Does he attack? What does Ivanka? Does Ivanka? I mean, this is a whole.
Well, many Trumps could run.
This could be.
Is Tiffany a Democrat? Who knows?
Let 1,000 Trumps bloom. I think we're probably That's about a pretty good show, Bill.
I agree. We should probably end it
We've
on
given
a,
the
on an
people
up
their
note.
money. We didn't even talk about half the stuff. I don't think we need to. I think this is great.
What do you got to plug, Matt?
I had a great week on the podcast, the Matt Lewis and the News podcast this week. I interviewed Andrew Sullivan, who had a really cool essay about, we've got peace and prosperity. How come everybody's so worried and upset? Like, why aren't we happy? So that was kind of a deep, possibly depressing, but very deep and thoughtful conversation with Andrew Sullivan. And then I interviewed just yesterday Jordan Peterson.
Who is this guy? I keep seeing him come up. He's in a fight with somebody, and I don't know if I should care. I don't think I should care. But who is this guy?
We live in an interesting world where it's so fragmented that people who have millions of Twitter followers and Facebook followers and YouTube views are super famous and yet unknown by other really smart people. It's a weird time in which we live. I think everyone needs to know who Jordan Peterson is. Do I have the book here? No, I think I took it down. He's got a new book out. He has millions of YouTube views. He is a Toronto clinical psychologist turned.
You've already lost me.
Right-wing intellectual. David Brooks wrote a column recently saying that this was the Jordan Peterson moment.
So what is his idea that's so interesting?
Well, I think that he is primarily okay, a couple things. His main thing is talking about things like so he's a professor in Canada, and I think what first made him famous is Canada tried to make him use these different pronouns, right? So instead of saying he or she, you have to say she, or I don't even know what these things are, but I assume at some point the jackbooted thugs are going to come and make us start referring to these different gender pronouns. He refused to do it. He got into some sort of trouble. He started giving these lectures on YouTube that got millions of views. So he says he's not a conservative, but he's like a traditionalist in the sense that he feels like the left right now is trying to kind of upend, the civilization as we've developed it and sort of question all the premises of the world. He's very popular with young men. We've heard about things like the war on men or men on strike. Like people like Hannah Rosen have written about this trend. And so in some ways he appeals to a little bit of the alt-right Trump voter, but he's not alt-right and he doesn't like Trump really either. So that's part of what makes him interesting. He's also this kind of academic intellectual guy who doesn't dumb down his message, who talks like a professor, sounds like a professor. In fact, one of the criticisms of him is that it's kind of you have to listen to hours and hours of his lectures to sort of discern what he really is saying. And some people think that that's done to kind of cloak the fact that his ideas are just kind of trite, like pablum, like work hard and you'll get ahead, But that's what the critics say. Mm-hmm. Basically, what I think is important about him is that right now in America, you've got basically this schism. And on one hand, you've got kind of like alt-right Trumpers who are anti-intellectual. And on the other hand, you've got these kind of weak, conservative, establishment, elite types who've been basically saying the same things over and over. And out of nowhere comes this guy, Jordan Peterson, who's looking at it and he's actually strong. This goes back to the Joe Biden thing. He may be, I don't know if he's wrong, but he's definitely strong. He's tough. He doesn't back down. He's tough. He's tough. He's strong. He doesn't back down. And he's coming at things from a different perspective. He's also been making the circuit on like Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, Adam Carolla, Joe Rogan. So he's been hitting this kind of young podcast scene in America. Anyway, listen to the podcast. I think I'm biased, but I feel like my interview with him was actually one of the best interviews I've heard him give. Partly because I think that you don't want to interrupt or stop somebody who's smart prematurely, because you're going to cut them off before they say something smart. But by the same token, you can't like let a guy like this just talk and talk and talk, because eventually it becomes very like esoteric and deep, and like he's talking about like Jung and Freud, you know what I mean? And so like I feel like I did a really good job of kind of keeping him on track without stuffing out the smart stuff he was going to say. So check it out. So Andrew Sullivan and Jordan Peterson on the podcast this week. Not bad.
All right.
How about you, Bill? What do you got?
I got nothing.
All right. Well, then download both podcasts.
Okay. Well, I already mentioned that you were on my new podcast. Did I mention this last show?
Let's plug that now.
So I have a new podcast called New Books in Politics. It's part of the New Books Network, which is a whole podcast empire where with author interviews who write new books. Very simple concept. My inaugural guest was the one and only Matt Lewis, talking about Too Dumb to Fail. So if you go to New Books Network, I think it's newbooksnetwork.com, you can find that and subscribe to the politics channel, I believe. Yeah,
and so you're going to be interviewing lesser, of course, but other authors.
My next one is going to be Joshua Zeitz, who just wrote a book about the Johnson administration building the Great Society. That is a part of is on my calendar for today. So hopefully that will go up. If not, late this week, early next week.
Awesome. All right. And how do they find that, download it?
New Books Network, newbooksnetwork.com.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Well, follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Check us out. Here back again next week. And we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thanks.